What's up, everybody? Welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and we have a busy show for you. This past weekend was the college recruiting period where college coaches finally got back on the road to check out the best available high school players, as well as mostly some of the best rising seniors in the class of 2025. This was a change in the recruiting calendar from past years where it used to be a weekend or 2 weekends in the month of April. This year, they pushed it back to May to accommodate for the transfer portal and really allow college coaches to focus on one thing at a time. We had boots on the ground at all three major circuits, and we're going to have everybody joining me here on this show to break down what we saw at the Nike EYBL, Adidas 3SSB, and the Under Armour Association. First up, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst Travis Branham. Trav, you and I were both at the EYBL, but before we get to that, you just broke some fairly significant news here on the transfer portal on 247sports.com. Tell us, what is the latest?
Yeah, so Chaz Lanier, he ranks as the number 11 overall transfer in the portal out of North Florida. He just completed 3 official visits to BYU, Kentucky, and to Tennessee, and now he's expected to be making a decision here in the near future. Heading into the transfer portal, Tennessee was expected to be the leader, and they were the favorite entering this recruitment. However, Kentucky made up significant ground, but following these official visits over the weekend, Tennessee has now jumped back into the leader spot as, again, we head into this decision that could come as early as Friday, but I do not anticipate this going far or deep into next week.
All right, so Chaz Lanier now favored to go to Tennessee per Travis's reporting. Obviously, this would be significant news. A player who went through the draft process and potential to follow in the footsteps of Dalton Knecht, who played his way into being a likely lottery pick this year. What should Tennessee fans expect from Chaz Lanier if he does, in fact, end up a Vol?
Yeah, I would not set the expectation that he is Dalton Knecht, but if you are looking for a person who could be the Dalton Knecht of this next class, it would be Chaz Lanier. He's a 6'4", strong-bodied guard that can really shoot it from deep. He makes shots both off the catch and pull, has range, but he's also, again, strong. He's a physical driver, can get to the rim. And an area for growth for him, and an area that I think he could really excel at, is his passing. He's shown flashes of ability and vision. Now it's just a matter of expanding that area of his game to partner and couple with that shot making and scoring ability. So at the end of the day, whether he goes to Tennessee as is expected, or if he does slip and go to Kentucky, this is a 3-level score shot maker with potential as a playmaker with the ball in his hands.
All right, so we are on commitment watch for Chaz Lanier, with Tennessee being the favorite here as we enter the final days of his recruitment. Trav, let's turn the page now and talk about our weekend in Indianapolis. You and I were both at Nike EYBL Session 3. This was my first weekend at EYBL this year. I believe it was your second. Want to ask you, if you had to pick one player to talk about first, who would that guy be?
Yeah, my most outstanding player of the weekend is 2026 recruit Tyron Stokes. He currently ranks as the number 2 overall prospect after a bit of an inconsistent year with prolific prep. But man, this weekend he was at his absolute best. An area that we have been continuing to monitor with him is just piecing a whole game together. There's a lot of times you see him go out there, dominate for a half, maybe disappear in the second, and it's just a matter of becoming more mature as a player. And this weekend, I watched him on two separate occasions, and he was absolutely dominant in both settings, from tip to finish. Just thunderous dunks, making shots, showing his passing and vision out in transition, getting to the rim. Just an absolute mismatch nightmare. And he was at his best, and honestly, nobody looked quite like him.
No, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Certainly a statement weekend from Tyron Stokes. I thought his body looked great too. I mean, this is a guy who's been powerful since he first arrived in high school basketball. A lot of people thought he was old for his age. In fact, old for his grade, I should say, when in fact he was even a little young for his grade, but he was so powerful at such an early age. He looks really fit to me right now. And as you said, the biggest thing is putting together an entire game from start to finish. I do think we're starting to see that maturation for him as he looks to regain that #1 ranking. We will have updated 2026 rankings coming out next month in June, and he is certainly making his case, taking his game to a next level. Want to ask you about the Boozer twins now, Cameron and Caden. What did you see from those guys in Indianapolis?
Yeah, they just recently added a top 5 recruit in Caleb Wilson onto their team. So you're curious, how are all these guys going to mesh? In the Boozers, they were steady and they were the same old, same old. Cameron was dominant on both ends of the court, particularly on the glass, being an inside-out scorer. And we've talked about it here on the show. Cameron continues to improve as a shooter from 3. He does have a low release and a low shot pocket. However, he has proven to become very consistent and reliable on the perimeter. He's also continuing to show development in his ball handling. That's an area we're continuing to monitor with him. He has shown flashes of ability, just getting downhill, changing directions. He is mostly relied on just being a bully ball straight line driver. But all in all, very positive weekend out of Cameron. And similarly, his twin brother, Caden, ran the show, sets the table for everybody around him, competes on both ends of the floor. As you can see there, he's a downhill guard, likes to get to the rim, and likes to get into that paint where he can distribute to guys out onto the perimeter. But you rewind the clock 2 years ago, and you see how he shot the ball. Then compared to what he's doing now, the shot still needs some work. But my goodness, there hasn't been many kids that we've seen come through high school that have evolved their shot quite like him. It's a low shot pocket, but he is proving to be a shooting threat at this point, at least off the catch. You can't just leave him wide open like you could 2 years ago. So he's continuing to make progress in his game. And on the recruiting front, these guys, the 3 teams that continue to pop up as the top 3 leaders is Miami, Florida, and Duke. Miami in past has been believed to be the leader. I still believe that is true today. But we are not sleeping on Florida or Duke. Right now, after John Calipari moved to Arkansas, they're also continuing to try to get involved here, or stay involved, I should say, at their new school. And then Michigan, Dusty May is also trying to enter the picture here. But the 3 schools that continue to pop up are Duke, Florida, and Miami. And also, I should mention there's one more school to look out for, and that is North Carolina, as they're believed to be taking a visit there sometime in the future.
Yeah, John Shire was front and center the 2 times that I caught them this weekend. So Duke is very clearly continuing to pursue. Obviously, Jim Larrañaga, he would be a huge get for the Hurricanes. I want to ask you about this because I think this was in both of our mentions coming out this weekend. I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I don't think it is, but to me, Cameron Boozer is the most reliable player in high school basketball. Like if I needed to win a game tomorrow, you can argue who the best long-term prospect is. I suppose you can argue who the most impactful high school player is too, but he would be the first player I took and said, you know what, that's the guy I want first if I need to win a game tomorrow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's not a knock to AJ Devanza, because I think he is just as gifted and just as special in that same regard. But I think we've said it on here too. Cameron Boozer could start a high major basketball game tomorrow. And that's been the case for over a year now, just how physically developed, how mature he is, how competitive he is, how battle tested he is between Peach Jam, playing a national high school schedule, and winning on every single stage that he plays on. He's just extremely productive and extremely efficient every single time that he takes the floor, just about. And it's on a rare occasion you'll see him catch an off night. So yes, if you're taking a game, if you're playing in a big game tomorrow, you need a player on your team to go out there and win it. You're taking Cameron Boozer right now.
All right, now one player who started the weekend with a huge offensive outing was Will Riley. Did you get a good look at him this weekend?
I did. I got to catch in on him for 2 separate games after that explosive outing. And Will is a very intriguing prospect. Physically, there's been a lot of talk about him potentially going to the 2024 class. And I do believe that is very much on the table in a route that they will strongly consider taking. But physically, I wouldn't anticipate him being ready to make a significant impact for a team next year. He's going to need a year to get his body right. However, as a prospect, the size, the length, the athleticism, the ability to make shots off the dribble and off the catch, flying off screens, and also getting downhill and showcasing his vision and passing ability. There's just a lot of potential here as a playmaking and scoring wing/guard, however you want to use him. But again, he's going to need to get stronger. And when that body starts to fill out and starts to mature, he can make a significant jump in his development and be a guy that NBA teams are particularly intrigued with.
Yeah, Will Riley's ascension, I think, really gained momentum during the recent high school season at Phelps. He opened that season with a couple of really explosive offensive outings, which we wrote about at 247sports.com. But to your point, he's still a long way from a finished product physically. And I question his ability to play through contact at the college level without another year to build up that body. But given the current state of college basketball and the associated NIL concerns, we'll see if that comes to fruition. Trav, what's the latest with his recruitment? You mentioned reclassification is a possibility, but how about, are there particular destinations that we should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, the two schools that pop up the most is Kentucky and Arizona. These are two schools that were watching him throughout the course of the entire weekend, but they're not the only two involved. They are expected to both get him on campus for a visit, whereas Arkansas and Alabama are also two teams to monitor here, especially John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks. As of right now, they still need bodies for the 24-25 season. If I'm remembering correctly, they only have 8 scholarship players currently listed, so they need to continue to fill out this roster, get some added depth here. So wouldn't put it past John Calipari to put a strong push on Will Riley and potentially try to bring him into 2024. But the teams that again have been continuing to pop up as the battle, as the top two in the battle, is Kentucky and Arizona. Determining a leader, I would say it's too soon right now.
One player that had a huge weekend from start to finish was Jalen Harrelson, and it seemed very appropriate as we were in the state of Indiana, where he stars for La Lumiere. What were your impressions of Harrelson this weekend in terms of not only what he showed, but how his game has evolved? Because he's a prospect that's been on the radar and nationally ranked since this class debuted.
Yeah, rewind the clock just about a month ago when we were in Memphis, and I got to catch a game of his, and it was a tale of two halves. The first half, he was passive, which has been a bit of the tendency for his just over the course of the last 2 seasons that we've really known about him. But in that second half, he flipped that switch and he was aggressive and just completely took over the game. And this is a versatile forward, wing, guard, however you want to kind of use him. You've over the course of this week, and you saw him play both on and off the ball. But getting downhill, creating for others, he does have vision and feel as a passer. He can also make shots. That's an area he's really improved in. So what we saw in Memphis, just that light switch being turned off and then flipping on and just ramping up his aggression. I would say this weekend, that light switch was on the entire time on both ends of the court. And it really, really stood out with just how he could get downhill, finish at the rim, impact on the glass, defend, and then again, continue to make shots and just show the upside. So overall, it was a stock rising weekend for Jalen Harrelson, despite being ranked the number 11 recruit in the country.
And I love his versatility. I mean, you talked about all the different things he can do on the floor to help you win. I think at this stage, a lot of players and sometimes even the people around him get worried about, like, hey, what position does he play? And don't worry about it. Like, I would point to somebody like Steph Castle, who was, going through the process saying, I'm a point guard, I'm a point guard, I'm a point guard. He gets to UConn, they put him at the 3, and they win a national championship. And by the way, his draft stock did nothing but increase. I think Jalen Harrelson, although he's not quite the same prototype as Steph Castle, he's got that same kind of versatility where he's going to be able to play multiple positions. He's going to be able to be on and off ball, as you said. He can grab and go certainly off the defensive glass. In terms of if he has that versatility on the defensive end of the floor, he's all the more intriguing. So certainly a prospect to watch here as we continue to track Jalen Harrelson as we have since his debut in this class, because he has been someone who's been identified from the very first step. Trav, we were sitting together, I think it was Saturday morning, and you said to me, you need to get eyes on Isaiah Dennis. He is someone that you had watched earlier in the EYBL season. I, in fact, did go see Team CP3. They played Team Takeover. It was a big win for Takeover, but it it was very obvious Isaiah Dennis's upside and his ability, the shot making, the quick release, and even had more versatility in his attack than I was expecting. Got to the rim. And in that game, at least, he showed that he was a scoring threat at multiple levels. This is someone now that you and I have both written about. So what was it about Isaiah Dennis that caught your eye early? And what do we know about his recruiting process at the moment?
Yeah, the first thing that jumped out to me was just the size in his frame. Very lean, good athlete. As you said, he can get downhill. And what started to jump out to me was the shot making, his ability to get to his spots from 15 feet and at the rim. And then he started to show flashes as a passer and playmaker. I watched him again this past weekend, and while he struggled with ball pressure against a really tough and pesky defender that is Nigel James out of Expressions, another top 100 recruit, when he got switched off and he got another guard in front of him, he was able to once again show his ability to get downhill. He was much more comfortable creating plays for other people and was also, again, comfortable making shots for three. And he stayed, even despite struggling with the ball pressure, he didn't really let it rock his confidence too much. He was still very aggressive in pulling the trigger from three, and he continued to impact the game as a shot maker. And they actually ended up making a roaring comeback in that game. But it's just the size, and as you said, the versatility. He's not a true point. He is a combo, more shooting guard than even true combo guard at this point. But the flashes are there, and there's promise and upside in him becoming a true combo guard who can play both on and off the ball.
All right, one more guard that I want to mention, and that is Caden Lewis from Team Durant, another one who has been ascending all year long. I watched him in a head-to-head matchup with Darius Acuff, and I'll tell you what, it was clear that he was playing like he had something to prove. Now, to his credit, he did not come out and dominate the ball and hunt shots. I thought he played within the flow. He got other guys involved, but down the stretch in the last 2 minutes, that was when he delivered. He had a three-point play and a made three from behind the arc, two huge buckets that proved to be the difference maker for Team Durant. Then he made two free throws down the stretch to help ice the game. But I came away from this weekend thinking Caden Lewis is another prospect who is making a rise here in this national class of 2025 and really asserting himself as one of the better lead guards in the class. Where do you stand on that one, Trev?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. He really exploded this winter when I was up in Washington, D.C., as was Dushawn London, where he just completely took over a game just on as a scorer and playmaker, and he's continuing that rise again this spring. Watching him this weekend, just how shifty and quick he was with the ball in his hands, able to break anybody down on the court, get to any spot he wanted to, showcases that three-level scoring, just a dynamic ball handler that can just create any sort of offense in a pinch, whether it's for himself or for somebody else. So Caden Lewis continues to impress. I think we are going to see a big bump in the rankings come next update.
Yeah, no doubt about that. That next update just a few weeks away now. But until then, you can read more about the EYBL 247sports.com. Travis and I were both in Indianapolis with multiple recaps and analysis, 247sports.com, and of course the 24 Sports channel on YouTube, where you can find all of your college basketball, college football, and associated recruiting needs. Thank you very much to Travis for joining us. Now we are going to welcome in Brandon Jenkins. While Travis and I were at Indianapolis for the Nike EYBL, Brandon, he was at Adidas 3SSB in College Station, Texas. Is that where we were?
Yes, sir. Actually, right by it in Bryan.
All right. Bryan, Texas. Brandon Jenkins in his home state. By the way, nobody does a better job of covering the state of Texas than Brandon Jenkins. But Brandon, you saw the entire country on that Adidas circuit here this weekend. Who was the player that stood out to you the most?
Well, yeah, before I answer it, that was a hard answer to choose just because Adidas is loaded with so much talent. I mean, you had Nate Ament with Team Loaded, who I believe is still hosting an undefeated record. And then you also have a player like Darren Peterson, who's really talented in his own right. But I think the dude who really separated himself and has continued to over the past 3 years is Koa Pete. And just reading, your former articles about how he's dominated over the past 3 years, I completely agree with it. Just being somebody 3 years ago who's played 15U and has been able to be as productive as he was then, and then moving up as a 16-year-old playing up and still being able to dominate. And now we're looking at him as a 17-year-old, and it is effortless in the way that he is productive. He's still playing up to his strengths of being a dominant rebounder, leading the break, getting his teammates involved. But the one thing that really stood out to me was his ability to shoot the basketball. That's one area that has always kind of been a glitch in his game, but he showed a lot of confidence in getting to his spots in the mid-range and also getting to his pull-up game behind three. A lot of the coaches that were recruiting him were in attendance. You saw Hubert Davis, you saw Kelvin Sampson, you saw Tommy Lloyd. And you could just tell, like, by the facial impressions of just looking at the head coaches in attendance that, you know, he is somebody that they must have just because of his maturity level and his approach to the game. He's all about winning. And it was just one of those things that was really loud. And then when you focus on the recruiting front, I got a chance to catch up with him after his games. And the next visit on schedule for him is an official visit to Houston. I believe it's set for June the 6th. And, you know, that's a key visit to look out for. The staff has been really, really in on him as a player. And Houston could emerge as a team that could be in the top 3 of his recruitment. Now, Cole Pete is currently down to a top 10 list of schools, and you could see blue bloods like Duke and North Carolina really getting in there, as well as in-state programs like Arizona and Arizona State. But I heard from a reliable source that, you know, Pete and his family are taking Houston seriously, and I think it would be a perfect fit just when you think about Kelvin Sampson and what he preaches from a physicality standpoint, and then Cole Pete's mentality and his approach to the game. So, yeah, he definitely separated himself from the rest of the pack.
And, of course, we are just 1 year removed from Jarris Walker being a one-and-done lottery pick at Houston, playing a similar type of position. You mentioned a couple of things there, though, that I just wanted to reemphasize. The first one was getting to his spots. When I watched Koa Pete play, because I attended session 2 of Adidas in Birmingham, Alabama, and that was the thing that really resonated to me when I watched him play. Like, this is a guy who understands where he is at his best and understands how to get there. So, yeah, the floor spacing and the three-point shooting, we need to see a continued progression of that. But I actually think that's going to happen because we've seen progression in his game in a variety of different areas. So we know he puts in the work. We've seen him sculpt up his frame in the last 2+ years. We've seen him add more stuff off the dribble. We've seen him be able to now take the ball off the glass and go with it a little bit, even play make off the bounce from a couple different spots. He's got good touch. So if that 3 ball starts to catch up, now you're looking at someone who is as consistently productive as anyone in the class and who gets rave reviews for his maturity, for his work ethic, for his leadership. All that stuff is absolutely off the chart. So I'm glad you brought up Koa Pete, and I'm glad to hear he stood out. I want to ask you now about 2 guards that I thought in session 2 really moved the needle for me. The first one was Indiana Elite's Braylon Mullins. And I'm going to confess to you this, Brandon, before I ask you how he did this weekend. He made such an impression to me in session 2 that I'm sitting there at EYBL this weekend in Indianapolis, and every guard I see, I'm like, would I take you over Braylon Mullins? Would I take you over Braylon Mullins? So tell me what you thought of that Indiana Elite guard this weekend.
Yeah, well, my level of intrigue was kind of different just because, you know, we spend time during the winter, during their high school seasons interviewing him. And he was one of the kids that I talked to. And we had a very good conversation about his recruitment and who was involved. So I was kind of interested to see who would show up and if he would show out. And, you know, throughout the course of the weekend, he did. Now, he fits the modern era of college basketball from a shooting perspective. Obviously, he's known as a long-range shooter. But the thing that stands out to me is his quick trigger and his ability to shoot off movement. I think those 2 things translate. And, you know, that's why you see a lot of the schools like Kansas, Stanford, North Carolina, Purdue, they're extending offers this week because they see how his game translates. Now, after watching him take the floor and, you know, put on a bunch of great performances in front of these high major coaches, he mentioned 3 schools that he's interested in taking official visits to. He mentioned Michigan. He said Dusty May reached out ever since he's taken the job and has been having cool conversations with him. He's also mentioned Indiana, the in-state school. He wants to take that visit with his Indiana Elite teammates, Trent Sisley and Malachi Moreno. And then he also mentioned UConn, and that one really stood out to me just because obviously Dan Hurley, generating hype for great reason, being a back-to-back national championship head coach. I like the way that he's prioritizing winning, and he's prioritizing a translatable skill set as he usually does. Indiana Elite is 13-0, and Braylon Mullins is a big reason why. And his game is suited to play off like talent, and he's proven to do so against great competition. So I think Dan Hurley is back at it again, looking to, you know, find that perfect fit. And, being the terrific evaluator he is, Braylon Mullins could be on the verge of landing a Huskies offer.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. Braylon Mullins, a lot of people talk about the shooting. This guy is not one-dimensional. In fact, I was impressed with his prowess on the defensive end of the floor, which I think is pretty consistent with his reputation back in his home state. One other guard who has been winning games and really proving himself on the national map is Jamarian Bateman. He's with Power 5. Again, this was someone who very much moved the needle for me a few weeks ago in Session 2 in Alabama. I'd heard lots of good things about him over the years, playing well at different stops, but never seen him really produce, at least to the level that he has this spring on a national circuit. So what was your impression of Jamarian this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. It was my first time taking his game in. Now, obviously, I read our director of basketball, Eric Bossie's recap on him. I read your recap on him. So I was really intrigued to see him perform, obviously, with the hype that he's drawn this spring. And he is one of those players, our job is to watch these guys perform in person, but he's one of these players who his highlights that you see on social media kind of match how he plays. He gets the green light playing for Power 5, and sometimes his shot selection is questionable, but he is really productive. He knows how to create his own shot at his own pace. He never seems to get sped up, and he plays with a lot of confidence. But the thing that stands out to me is he has very long arms, and he takes full advantage of his length on the defensive end. You could just tell that he's engaged and looking to guard with a high level of enthusiasm. He's composed in his approach, and he takes winning seriously. They play a free-flowing offense, but, like I said, he takes advantage of just being able to score at his own pace. He can make shots, and he's just one who's lived up to his billing as one of the top stock risers this spring heading into the summer. When we discussed his recruitment after watching him perform, he said that he was interested in looking at schools such as Cincinnati, Creighton, West Virginia, and even possibly Louisville as schools that he was looking to take official visits to. But he also highlighted Marquette and Iowa State as the two schools in the lead for his recruitment. And when we talked to him back in February, he kind of said the same thing. And knowing both of those staffs, they're going to go full force in trying to make sure that they get him committed as soon as possible. So it'll be interesting to see. He said when he was talking about his time frame that he could potentially be making a decision as early as, next week, or he might extend it out just to see what schools get involved. But I can see Iowa State and Marquette looking to try to get this thing done, hopefully by the end of the summer.
All right, that is certainly one to watch. Jamarian Bateman has been a national stock riser, shot maker, a little bit of an unorthodox release, but he's long, he's chiseled, he's an elite competitor, and he plays both ends of the floor. That's Brandon Jenkins, who has even more coverage. 247sports.com. Brandon, thank you for joining us again. Wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates, including the most recent breaking news by Travis Branham, and all of Brandon Jenkins' recaps from Adidas 3SSB this past weekend. Now, finally, we are going to welcome in Dushawn London. While Travis and I were at Nike, Brandon was Adidas. Dushawn, he was outside Cincinnati at the Under Armour Association. Dushawn, welcome to the show.
Yep, thank you for having me.
All right. Now, one of the most accomplished players in the UAA is Sean Abayev. When a year ago, he was putting up huge numbers as a rising junior, and he's continued to do that now as a rising senior. What did you see from him this weekend in Cincinnati?
Yeah, so I had the chance to see Sean twice, and the game that really stood out to me was when they played Team Thrill. So he's about 6'7", and he could really shoot the ball. And when I say shoot the ball, he could come off screens, he could create his own shots. But what really stood out is that he could face up defenders and really just shoot over you. He had multiple and 1 threes, and he's just a really good shot creator. And if you try to run him off the three-point line, he could get to that mid-range shot, and it's effective. And now with his mid-range, he could get to his floater. So he might not attack the rim all the way, but when he gets down to his floater, he could really, really be effective.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I had the same impression of Sean seeing him at Session 1 in Rock Hill, South Carolina a few weeks ago. And I don't know that there's a player in the Under Armour Association who is more consistently able to create their own shot against a half-court defense. And you said it right there. He just shoots over top of you. He's got to be a little bit more efficient in terms of not being a ball stopper, being able to attack quicker and not let the weak side defense load up. But he's someone who is certainly continuing to stand out. I want to ask you about another wing in that Under Armour Association, actually in the UA Rise, and that is Jordan Scott with Virginia Elite. This is a nationally ranked player with high major recruitment, but what is the latest on Jordan Scott?
So Jordan Scott, the main thing that I saw is that he had 3 head coaches come out to see him. So we're talking Maryland, Kevin Willard, Indiana, Mike Woodson, Virginia Tech, Mike Young. We got to look at those 3 schools because they're pushing really, really hard. And if it's not a head coach there, they also had assistant coaches there. So that's 3 schools that I really want to look at for Jordan Scott. But he also told me that he wants to Maryland, he wants to visit in early September. Virginia Tech, he also wants to visit them in Georgetown. But the main school that I want to look at outside of those ones I just mentioned is Michigan State. So the Spartans, that's his one and only in-home visit that he's taken. So I would want to look at them. They set an assistant there, and yeah, they're in there deep along with those other schools that I just mentioned.
Yeah, Tom Izzo and the Spartans known to be in good shape with Jordan Scott. I want to ask you about that other wing before we move on. Sean Abayev, what is the latest with his recruitment?
Yeah, so with Sean Abayev, there's a couple of schools that's firmly in the mix. First, Tennessee and Oregon. They were at almost all his games over the weekend. So I really, for fans, you should look at those 2 programs. But I also want to mention Syracuse because, as we know, Adrian Autry was in Indy watching Kyan Anthony, and he made the trip over to come see Sean Abayev along with an assistant coach. So the Syracuse is in there pretty deep, along with Tennessee, Oregon, but also Michigan. Michigan is a school that he mentioned that has made up a lot of room since Dusty May came in from being at FAU and having that relationship. He's a Florida kid. Also, Miami, Florida State, UCF were also in attendance, but Dusty May has already skipped a lot of steps in his recruitment from that relationship at FAU.
We have to wonder if Dusty May, knowing, coming off that Final Four, knowing he probably wasn't going to be at FAU forever, said, you know what, I'm going to start to recruit this local guy and just see where I end up. But third guy I want to ask you about, and this one I'm particularly curious because I did not see him in that initial session in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and that is Davis Fogel. So what were your impressions of him this weekend?
Yeah, Davis. So obviously he's a high-level shooter. That's one thing that stands out. But his shot's a little unorthodox, but it goes in. So I'll give him that. But what I really liked about him is that he has really long arms, a really long stride. So he was able to get down, get to the rim, finish. He's not the strongest, most fierce type of prospect, but he gets to the rim and he uses those long arms, those long strides to finish and either over the top of defenders or around them. So yeah, he was very aggressive, got to the free throw line, and I see why he made his debut last year.
And you know what? I love the fact that you pointed out long strides. I think that's something that people don't talk enough about. It's all about the look test. He looks long, but if you play with long strides, that means you play long. You've got an efficient floor game. You're getting as far as you can with each movement, and that is absolutely huge. So it's a great observation by you. What do we know about Davis Fogel's recruitment?
Yeah, so I actually spoke to Fogel after the game, and he said that these are the schools recruiting him the hardest right now: Gonzaga, Nebraska, Kansas, Creighton, and LSU. And most notably, when I was watching him play, Fred Hoiberg, he was there front and center for Fogel, and that was where he took an official visit. And he's also taken an unofficial to Gonzaga. That's the hometown school. So Nebraska and Gonzaga, they're recruiting him really hard. But also another school is Kansas. Norm Roberts, he came out. He was also front and center, and he's also taking Kansas very seriously. But I've in terms of schools recruiting hard, I would definitely say Gonzaga, Nebraska, and Kansas are really putting that front foot forward.
All right, Dushawn has lots more from the Under Armour Association available right now, 247sports.com. Dushawn, thank you as always for joining us. And you know what you're going to find there, folks. It's wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, including final rankings in the class of 2024, and soon-to-be updated lists in 25 and 26. Transfer portal updates, including the most latest breaking news from Travis Branham just moments before we went on the show. 247sports.com, all day, every day. And be sure to keep it locked here on the 24/7 Sports channel for an upcoming edition of the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show. Until then, thanks for watching.